Good evening, everyone. Starting off with election news tonight, supporters and opponents of Amendment 5 are saying the same thing today. There's still more work to be done to make life more affordable for Missourians. The tally after last night's vote, 83% of people voted against that amendment. Hannah Falcon has more on what the vote means for Missouri.
Missourians were loud and clear this election day. Voters overwhelmingly rejected a proposal to replace the state's income tax with new or higher sales taxes. Missouri realtors led the campaign against Amendment 5. Their main concerns were that the plan would have taken power away from regular Missouri citizens and made life more expensive for most. In the light of a new day, spokesperson Scott Charton tells me there's better ways to provide financial relief for Missourians.
There is a better way forward. Let's let the people help us inform what that is.
If they had given you a version of Amendment 5 that had the exemptions the governor talked about, like for real estate and healthcare and agriculture, or had more specifics on exactly which taxes would be changed, would that be a more acceptable version?
Well, look, the Missouri realtors have just spent millions, and the people responded with more than 80% of the vote to say, we want to protect the sales tax on services ban. We don't see a negotiation about that, and the people have certainly validated that, and we think the politicians should listen to that.
Ahead of the vote, Governor Mike Kehoe made a promise.
As long as I'm in office, I'm going to always look for ways to make it the burden of government less on Missouri families and let them keep more of their own money.
He echoed that statement Tuesday night, admitting defeat but saying he would look for other options to cut taxes. Lawmakers could still cut income taxes, but without voter approval, they cannot implement any new taxes to replace the revenue. The Missouri Promise PAC, which supported Amendment 5, declined my request for an interview today. They did issue a statement saying they plan to continue working with the governor to lower income taxes. Reporting in Jefferson City, I'm Hannah Falcon.